Yes, indeed. Good morning, everybody. This is for the second occasion, really. I've had, just excuse me a bit. Right, this might be a little better. It is for the second occasion I've had the opportunity, and whether or not it is an opportunity is questionable, to apologize for the preemptive closure of the yesterday's live, and it was due to my own, what I should say, I don't want to be too hard on myself, but certainly it was as a result of the loss of communication, Wi-Fi communications, that created that preemptive or premature, is one can consider it an anticlimax to, of course, the discussion yesterday. Anticlimax in the sense that the best was yet to come. In my view, of course, you will do that today because I will conclude, of course, yesterday's podcast or yesterday's live with what I had intended yesterday, today. Again, Lennox Smith, of course, shared the live on Corridor Transformation. Yes, Corridor Transformation Facebook page, or Alfred John. Share it, please. And of course, just tell people that Lennox Smith is here to conclude the whole question of crime and criminality and the way forward, having regard to the outcome of the 2020 general elections on the 10th of August. Because as I've said yesterday, and I'm not going to regurgitate too much of it, just to keep people in tune, if you look at yesterday's live, you would have an appreciation. Yesterday, of course, being the 5th, so I've given you the date so that you will not be confused. Today being the 6th of September. You would have observed that I made the case that when the PNM is in government, criminal behavior, particularly in the area of murders, escalates, and it does so exponentially, meaning not by a negligible increase, but of course an increase sufficient to have the population in a state of panic almost as to whether or not the individuals would be next. And I'm talking here individuals in terms of people, persons, human beings, and in terms of business, because for legal purposes, a business is considered to be a person as well. That is why you take them to court, and instead of taking the individuals who manage the business, you may take the business itself, because it is deemed as a person in contract law and of course in criminal law as well. So that being as it may, I will continue by indicating that it is clear, and the appointment of Fitzgerald Hines, yes, I must mention that, because he is the minister of what? He is the minister of youth and national service. And I was making the point about the fact that you have some 50 entities engaged in treating with young people and attempting in a real sense to mold them into moral, ethical, skills training, and most importantly discipline, so that they can go out there and make their contribution positively to society. In spite of the 50 type program, whether it be YTEP, whether it be MILAP, whether it be MITAP, whether it be GATE, whether it be, there's even one called, yes, GATE, you have GATE as well. And you have a plethora of others that have been introduced into the social safety net, I prefer to call it that, introduced into the social safety net of the country, so as to avoid the avalanche of youth youth delinquency, youth disillusionment, and avoiding the gravitation to a life of crime. It is instructive, I must say, because you see, leadership is always measured from what occurs at the top. And just as a family, if the parents, and of course inside of there you have, I'm a traditionalist, so you'll forgive me, even though we exist in an egalitarian society, where no one is above anyone, and that any one of the members of the head of the family, male or female, can do the job of either one. In other words, they can interchange with each other as far as jobs is concerned. Of course, the biological function is another story, because that seemed to be fairly consistent. I say fairly consistent because people can do some surgery and become another gender if they so desire, and if they have the propensity and the resources to do. So I'm not going to go there, that is another matter. But what I'm saying is that in an egalitarian society, men and women revere their independence, and the fact that a man could wash wares and a woman is not dedicated to washing clothes, because the man could do that as well. And of course, the position in terms of being a breadwinner in the family can also be ascribed to a woman, whilst traditionally that has always been the domain and the purview of the male in the family. So I want to get that clear. So I am I will not attempt to exhibit any machoism or any dominance of one gender over the next in a egalitarian environment. And I know that you would appreciate that, even though religionists and other persons who are steeped in their orthodoxy and of course in their right-wing approach to culture, and traditionalists, of course, adhering to the dictates of their respective religion. I respect that as well. But the reality is that the mundane or the carnal Trinidad and Tobago, as well as Western society, the approach is that both genders are equal in this family relationship. Always acknowledging across the world, of course, and across cultures, that the basic unit of every social arrangement, every social grouping in a country is the family. But I am not going there, because the family has a responsibility as well in terms of preventing young people from gravitating, whether it is female or male, gravitating to a life of crime. And therefore the value system, the level of monitoring the activities of young people as they grow from childhood to adolescent, and then of course to young adults. All of those factors must be put into the equation, so that whilst the state through these various programs will have an impact, that impact comes later down in the process of a young person's development. Because, as I've said yesterday, and I'll just run it over quickly, that with these 50 programs that exist, as I said, whether it be YTEP, whether it be the Civilian Conservation Corps, whether it be YAPA, and you can name it. But the thing about it is that we need to be able to structure it and streamline it to achieve one singular objective. And what is that objective, as I said yesterday? Is that that young person must now evolve into a productive, decent, disciplined, educated, contributing individual to the society. In this case, the society is Trinidad and Tobago. But I was making the point in terms of the building blocks to treat with that objective of having contributing, productive adults that have passed through, that have had an experience through the education system, whether it be at the early child care level, whether it be at the primary level, whether it be at the secondary level, and certainly at the tertiary level, where of course our academics and inventors and those persons who are expected to have a level of education cooperating and collaborating with others so as to find solutions to man's problems on earth. And that is where these programs must now find themselves in a position so as to contribute to that ultimate citizen that we all will desire. In other words, one that does not find themselves seeing crime and criminality as an option, and as a serious option, and most significantly, as a major option, as the option to survive, because we know what the outcome of that is. History in Trinidad and Tobago, as far as crime is concerned, there is a replete of instances like that. And therefore, I don't want to go into that because you would know. And therefore, what we have to do is to prevent that from happening. The thing about it is whether or not the PNM is up to it. And as I've said, that I don't know, this is a phenomenon. I have studied the issue. I have turned it up, down, sideways, central. And I have yet to come up with a solution as to why in Trinidad and Tobago, once the PNM is in government, murders escalates. And so only last year, apart from, of course, the incremental increase after the political demise, let's put it that way, of the UNC in 2015. I say political demise, not that the party is in demise. I say the political demise, meaning that the defeat of the UNC. And clearly, from a crime perspective, the UNC would have been the party to continue in government in 2015. Of course, one understands why. One of the fundamental reasons why the UNC lost was because of the belligerence, because of the aggression of Dr. Rowley attempting, and the PNM then, attempting to paint the sitting Prime Minister and her cabinet and the UNC members and activists and spokespersons in general as thieves, corrupt, and therefore have engaged in profligacy, waste, and of course mismanagement of the country's resource and taking advantage, abusive advantage of the governance of the country. All of which turned out to be a lie by Dr. Rowley. The singular smoking gun for that lie by Dr. Rowley and the PNM is the result, the eventual result after 3 or 4 years. Living with that stain. And you and I, none the wiser as members of the electorate. And let me tell you something one time. If I didn't know what I know about Dr. Rowley and the PNM, without a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt, I would have voted for the PNM in 2015. The way how Rowley came on the scene, a total deceiver, a purveyor of misinformation, disinformation, and a high degree of immorality, but promoting himself as a paragon of virtue and the savior of Trinidad and Tobago. What is the smoking gun? 3 years after, the email gate matter turned out to be a figment of Dr. Rowley's malicious, evil, diabolical, certainly educated to some extent, but very devious mind. So behind all of that education, because to become a doctor in the university, coming out from the University of the West Indies, you have to have some knowledge. You have to have a very clinical mind. But it appears that that has been used in the political arena to gain advantages that otherwise he would not have gained, nor the PNM. And that's a fact. You cannot waste time with that, whether you are a sycophant, whether you are a sympathizer, whether you believe that that ought not to be said, or you believe in the supremacy of the PNM. The fact of the matter is that that occurred. There are tangible, palpable, irrefutable evidence to show that Dr. Rowley and his emails were fake. The Commissioner of Police said that, just in case you prefer not to be guided by those realities, because the truth have a stubborn propensity not to leave you alone. And if your conscience will be your guide at the end of the day. There are those, the sociologists, not the sociologists, but the psychologists, called belief perseverance. They are persons who are engaged in a condition called belief perseverance, where they believe in something to such a degree that whatever of the negative side that may have occurred or came to them, as just as night gives way to day and vice versa, and you can tell the difference, they don't believe. They don't believe. That is beyond sycophantism. That is a person who clearly have decided in a very enlightened environment in terms of the social, economic, educational standards and qualities that we try to impart by virtue of the financing of the state. In spite of all of that, that is a person, in my view, is socially and economically suicidal. Has to be. Because in the face of all of those irrefutable evidence, as I said, palpable evidence, cogent evidence, potent evidence, you still trying to find reasoning to support that and that man who cannot advance any exculpatory evidence to wash away that national and treasonous sin that was committed on Kamala Prasad Bisesa and the UNC. And I'm glad to know, I'm very glad to know, very comforted to know, that in spite of all of his shenanigans and the PNM, and in spite of all of the charade, all of the ostentatious and sometimes rambunctious and frankly people, obnoxious orations of Dr. Rowley, Fitzgerald Hines, people like Sinanan. You have, of course, the nerd called Stuart Young. You have Smiley, Guy Smiley, Khan. In spite of that, and in spite of the assurances, and in spite of the body language, and in spite of the facial expressions, when, including, of course, Imber, don't forget that, and in spite of the ugly laughter, after they would have done something that is evil to the population, like, of course, raising gas prices through the reduction of subsidies 3 times, and laugh. We know behind there, your conscience must tell you, your own conscience must tell you, behind there, something is wrong. And therefore you must You must deviate from that suicidal mission. Because in this thing, not like how Rowley has pronounced it, but how it is being said here now, all of us are really in this thing together. Not Dr. Rowley and they. When he says it, he means that we must exist for their survival, politically, economically. And as they wallow and they bathe in how they fool the people and get unmerited and ill-gotten wealth through the very system that we had put them there to protect. Yesterday, for example, in an interview one-on-one with the Guardian, check it out, that man justified, let me repeat that Dr. Rowley in an interview yesterday with the Guardian justified the recusement, meaning that going out of the office, going out of the cabinet meeting of Al-Rari and Stuart Young some 94 times. Why? You only do that when you recuse yourself from a particular meeting or part of a meeting when a topic relating to you in terms of a conflict of interest. What does a conflict of interest mean? That you go in and be part and parcel of deciding on something that will benefit you, or benefit your family, or benefit a well-known friend, or a well-known confidant, or a well-known connected person to yourself. And Dr. Rowley said there's nothing wrong with that. He said that yesterday. He said that yesterday. People, wasn't Dr. Rowley who said that, and he used the term incestuous relationship to relate to when Kamala Prasad Bissasa's sister was being paid to her sister, or even when she was living or staying at the diplomatic center? Wasn't it Dr. Rowley who said that? Wasn't Dr. Rowley who said, well, listen, there was an incestuous relationship when NGC, National Gas Company, was made under the last administration to pay for the construction of that wastewater pipe conversion to Caroni from Port of Spain here. That wastewater treatment plant project. Nearly $1 billion, I believe it was. And he said that that in itself was an incestuous relationship because the company itself, what was the name of it? SIS, yes. Had some kind of relationship with the administration, with Kamala Prasad Bisasa. Yes, he talked about incestuous relationship. He is now in the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, and as Prime Minister, the Prime Minister, in his cabinet sitting right round the table. And he sees nothing wrong when on 94 occasions, 30-something in one case and 50-something in the next case, with both Al-Rari and Stuart Young having to excuse themselves, and mind you, our common sense will tell us that that was not by sincere exodus from the meeting. No exodus meaning moving out of. No, it was not sincere. It was planned and orchestrated, obviously. I said, waste that. Tell me that. The proximity of them being a potential beneficiary of a particular decision that the cabinet is to make, and they're recusing themselves, does not obfuscate, does not exonerate them from culpability and from manipulation and for exploiting the country's purse. And you and I, who are supposed to be getting benefits, they see the benefits for their friends, their family, and of course their acquaintances. 94 times And Dr. Rowley has no qualms with that. I thought I should introduce that in order to, because of what I read this morning from an interview that the Guardian had with Dr. Rowley yesterday. Because it impacts on crime as well and criminality, because those young people who are leaving school, in spite of the fact that they may not read papers, but they are on Facebook, they are on YouTube, and in scrolling through to get whatever information that they would have been looking for, what attracted them, whether it's music, whether it's some rap song or some other interests, they would have come across the articles of persons in this country who are incensed, who see that as wrong, and they would have posted up on Facebook as well. So don't believe that these people are ignorant, they are stupid, and therefore they have no interest in what is happening. Because when that happens at the level of the Prime Minister and his government and members of his government, and these young people see that, what you think they go think? What you think they go think? Charity begins at home and ends abroad. What monkey see, the other monkey do. What one monkey see, the other monkey do. I'm talking monkey here figuratively, not like Dr. Rowley attempting to make it look literally, and goes up into Sangre Grande on the twilight of the elections and talk about monkey and banana and so on, from a very innocuous, altruistic clip or advertisement promoting the efforts of the UNC as a very caring administration. He turned that into a racial pronouncement, and then claiming now that he's concerned in that very interview, he is talking, it appears that he's obsessed. He's talking about what? One corridor movement, and that was a racial construct of the UNC. Come on, Dr. Rowley, you still on that? And you expect people to take you seriously? In fact, people so did not take him seriously. Let me repeat that. People so did not take him seriously that all of the blogs commenting on that interview in one sentence describe him as the consummate racist, in spite of his efforts to try to deflect attention from himself. So it is idiosyncratic of the man. It is his pattern. It is his modus operandi. That is how he operates. That's how we think. But of course, in that interview, he talked about what? He is Prime Minister for all of the people. That is an egotistic statement. He doesn't mean that. Egotistic. All of his conduct during the course of the 5 years so far has demonstrated a bias, and this is based on him viewing certain people as enemy, including myself, and would want to attack them on the basis of what they are exposing. Like me, I know they don't like me, but I could care one iota, one cahoot. So when I said, and my conviction is based on facts, that Dr. Rowley is a rapist and a pedophile, it is based on the fact that, and he has not, I've been saying that for the past 5 years, and he has not sent me a pre-protocol letter, action protocol letter yet. And when little Johnson said it on a UNC platform for the local government election, he said, I'm going to sue him. And even if he apologized, I'm going to sue him. And when I said on 104.7, yes, tomorrow we'll have continuation of that, 104.7. And when I said that I will go as a witness, volunteer, and I got in contact with the young man, and I told him what I'm prepared to do, and I made it public, Dr. Rowley gone silent. As he has gone silent on the consequence and the final outcome, public disclosure of what transpired with respect to the emails that he put in Parliament and caused a government to be so tainted, to be so tarnished, that the average unsuspecting electorate, you and I who go in and vote, the unsuspecting, they didn't know, all that serious personnel was always about deception in order to get where he is today. He talks glibly about being in government and having won the elections. But he's not a happy man. Because he thought with those lies in 2015, he would have gotten about 26 seats, a landslide. But I want to say, on the other hand, there is a sufficient degree of intelligence among our electorate to not to give Dr. Rowley a landslide victory. He didn't get it in 2015. He neither got it in 2020. In fact, he was further reduced by 1. And the Kamala Prasad Bisesa UNC was increased by 1. 19 for Kamala and the UNC and 22 for the PNM and Dr. Rowley. Suggesting to me that at least at minimum, whilst I believe that the UNC ought to have won, based on the dastard conduct of Dr. Rowley and the pernicious and evil acts that he would have perpetrated in his quest for power on Kamala Prasad Bisesa and the UNC in particular, but Kamala Prasad Bisesa specifically because she was targeted by this evil man. In spite of that, you decided that, listen, I ain't taking no chances with this man. I will give him a next chance. But I am not so certain at this point in time if you had decided differently. But because of other factors, which I am satisfied resides inside of that Fort Knox called, or that fortress called the EBC. That something sinister did not go on in that particular election of 2020 that was conducted on the 10th of August. I am still not satisfied that has not happened. And therefore, as I told you on the last occasion, I am pursuing certain courses of action in order to get to the bottom of this matter, because it has to be. You cannot undermine the will of the people by firstly being the incumbent. Because if you weren't the incumbent in 2015 and you asked the EBC chairman, using your cordial relationship with the man and the possibility that you believe that he is beholden to the PNM, and therefore that very independent institution was polluted by asking of the chairman then to extend the time of voting by 1 hour in 2015. Dr. Rowley, we don't know what you did this time around, and why we don't know, and one of the reasons why we couldn't know is because you constructively prevented, I say prevented, yes, prevented independent observers to conduct and to observe the 2020 general elections. And you had a duty there to do, because you claim to be a Democrat and one who is confined within the parameters of the rule of law. And that you were so concerned about the undermining of the will of the people in 2015, you wrote the CARICOM Secretariat and the Commonwealth Secretariat, both of whom sent independent observers under Kamala Prasad Bisesa in 2015. Under you. By 2020, when the elections came around, none of that happened. And don't tell me about COVID, because elections were conducted in Guyana under COVID. And if it wasn't for those independent senators, if it wasn't for those independent, observers, not senators, observers, the then incumbent president would have still been there. He would have still been there because there was a conspiracy between the EBC, their EBC, their commission, their election commission, and the sitting government then to thief the elections. So I am saying that the possibility exists that you orchestrated such a dastard act to thief the election of 2020 in Trinidad is real until we can prove without a shadow of a doubt otherwise. Otherwise, one will not be accused, or you cannot accuse anybody of calling your government illegitimate because of that singular factor, and the fact that you did in fact try to influence the outcome of the 2015 election in your favor. You could jump high, you could jump low, you put that in your pipe and smoke it. There is a cross-section of the national society who is saying that you stole the elections, that you connived, that you orchestrated the non-presence of international independent observers from CARICOM, from Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth we know was prepared to come. You put impediments in their way, insisting on 14 days quarantine. They send back and say, no, if you test us and you give us 1 day, we will be here. But I don't know anything about that part of it. You did not tell the population that that recommendation came from where? From the British High Commission, who the Commonwealth Secretariat wrote to. When you asked them to try to assist with the funding for the 14-day quarantine, that really and truly was a non-issue, because I'm sure if you had spoken to the sitting opposition leader, she would have had no objections, but you didn't. You did that unilaterally and then come and make the announcement to the population as if you were so concerned about the propriety of the elections, and then make the most insultive statement that we have conducted the elections here in the past and no one had to supervise. And the other insultive and nonchalant and reckless statement was that if they come, they'll be able to sit in a room and watch the elections process virtually, making fun and lampoon the entire process. This is a serious matter, you know. People, this is a serious matter. Dr. Rowley has no moral authority to talk about the non-presence of independent observers and that we conduct ourselves when he is part and parcel. I have the most again if the elections turn out in favor of the PNM, as in fact, according to EBC, it did. But we don't know if there was a conspiracy once again between the EBC and Dr. Rowley and the PNM. We don't know that. We don't know, for example, how those ballot paper, but those correspondents that EBC would send, how they end up in some bush in Arima. Those ballot cards, or those voting cards, that would normally be sent prior to the election to potential electors. Those ballot cards, how they end up there. And we do not know yet, because EBC has refused to provide the recounters on the UNC side at least, who have insisted that they get it. Those ballot cards, those improvised ballot cards that would be issued to you when you get to the station on actual polling day to vote, once your name is in the binder? We don't know. And EBC refused. You telling me that if these independent observers haven't regard to what happened in Guyana, because among them, not only did they insist and threaten sanction against the Guyanese government, the man who was there over time, trying to use all kinds of legal and illegal maneuvers to try to get the elections in his favor. When elections is about numbers, and if the numbers say that somebody else win, you get the hell out. Dr. Rowley couldn't take that chance. And therefore he caused these independent observers not to be here. That's what he did. Because clearly, if they were here, they would have already and will be in a position to question as to why those polling cards were found where they found them in Arima. They would have had to question EBC as to why you're not giving the people the stubs and the numbers, the corresponding numbers for those polling cards that you issued in the polling stations. And if they didn't or they refused, and while that would be the basis for a court matter, which of course is a lengthy and costly matter, no party would want to engage at this point in time, especially the UNC having regard to the costs involved in the 2015 elections petitions. Dr. Rowley knows that. He knows all of that. A very criminal, orchestrative minded individual. This goes beyond politics, you know, people. This goes beyond politics. The fact that we can raise those issues now demonstrates that it is quite possible that that occurred because of Dr. Rowley's conduct. 94 times Al-Rari and Short Young recused themselves for possible conflict of interest in your cabinet, and you ain't get rid of them. They're still there. We ain't nobody others yet. I say. And then, no observers for the election. And he understood why that election for him was important. He doesn't care about the democratic process. He don't care about the will of the people. He only cares about his own survival, because he knows that Petrotrin would have been investigated and his role in Petrotrin and the fake oil would have come to the fore. It would have been a priority. If I was Prime Minister, I would have made it a priority. And I am not the Prime Minister, so I expect that a Prime Minister who is a human being in this country, having regard to the 65,000 persons that have been put on the breadline directly and indirectly from the closure of that particular venture, of necessity would have had to investigate. And the role of Dr. Rowley would have been central to that entire investigation. So he pulled off a scam. He pulled off a scam on the people in the last elections. But what I'm saying as well, that in spite of all of that, there are good people. Because they reduce him by one. And they augment or increase Kamala Prasad Bisasa and the UNC by one. Who knows what's going to happen on the next occasion? Because the devil is still in office. And as I keep saying, evil cannot prevail over good. You know what I say? Evil cannot prevail over good. Otherwise, the Gita is a lie, the Holy Bible is a lie, and the Holy Quran is a lie. And whatever other books that espouse the virtues of uprightness, honor, dignity, pride, honesty, doing good to your fellow man, any doctrine that espouses that All of that would be a lie if a man like Dr. Rowley and the PNM continues in office as is the case today. As is the case today. They're lying. So therefore there were good people who said, nah, in spite of all of that flam and that chivalry and that belligerence and that aggressiveness, something wrong with that man. Something wrong with that party. Because too often they see in others that which is in them. Marlene MacDonald is the classic case. He knew before she was screened, she was still screened, in the process made a deputy political leader of the PNM and finds herself before the court today. And by and large, those matters that he referred to ascribing the UNC of iniquitous conduct and exploitation of the people's resources, whilst they were in government between 2010 and 2015, not only does the election reflect that there is skepticism and doubt about Dr. Rowley's accusations, but after over the 5 years, most of those iniquities have manifested itself in private action taken by the state, by himself. Whether it's Monilad, whether it's Jolin John, and whether it's those companies that he said, according to Stuart Young, was engaged in mafia type, not mafia type, sorry, cartel type conduct. A term that is alien to our jurisprudence, according to Senior Counsel Ramesh Lawrence Maraj. He said, but you are an ass. There's no cartel law in Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, of course, you could bring a case of conspiracy and the abuse of office. You can talk about malfeasance and misfeasance, but you cannot talk about cartel type behavior. So let's face it, people. Your common sense will tell you that we are a small society, 1.3 million people. You'll also know that there is a limited amount of what? Businessmen, especially in the area of construction of roads and major projects that previously you would have had to have a foreign firm, maybe from some metropolitan country, to come and do it. To come and build a road, build a major bridge. But over the years, people have developed the capacity and they made the capital investment in vehicles and equipment and so on, and people and training in order to be able to construct on a local, domestic level by domestic businessmen the various roads that has now become necessary for the opening up of Trinidad and Tobago physically. They call it infrastructure, or infrastructure. And therefore there could only be, what, 3, 4, 5 of them. Not like in the United States where you have thousands of these kinds of businesses, and therefore a cartel is appropriate in those circumstances. But where the domestic situation is concerned, and because you have this limited amount of businessmen with that capacity and that kind of investment, multi-million-dollar investment in equipment, whether it's trucks, tractors, overloaders, crushing machines, etc. Because you have a limited amount, you depend on the government to motivate, because only the government will be able to build public roads. Not that it doesn't happen all over the globe, because right now, Trump is now looking at a package like that to, of course, rehabilitate their aging infrastructure, roads, bridges, drains, etc. He is doing that. So, but in Trinidad and Tobago, the economy relies on the financial health of the government, because the government is required to stimulate the economy and stimulate, because they control what? The commanding heights of the economy. The part of the economy that brings in the foreign exchange in the main, even though you have an industrial base comparative to the other islands, they don't have it like us. But the fact is that the government, of necessity, because if it was not so, then the government would have had a responsibility to do what? To privatize all of those areas that are considered to be in the commanding heights of the economy. Oil, gas, petrochemical. Even though a large part of the petrochemical industry, in this case, Point Lisas, we can look at, maybe in private hands, foreign mainly, some local, but government has an input as well. Again, demonstrating the role of government in the economic system or structure that we have in Trinidad and Tobago. Understand that? And therefore the government have a role. I'm saying all that to say that these companies that invest, these locals that invest in capital items, trucks and overloaders and so on, would rely on the government when the government has infrastructural issues to treat with, whether it be the highway to Point Fortin, whether it be the Curab roundabout that was recently completed, or any other roads in Diego Martin and any other part of the country, including, of course, the expansion of the airport in Tobago. The government initiates that. And having just 5 of them, how the hell you could talk about cartel? 5? They may be fiercely competitive, but cartel, agreeing, of course, to work out arrangements outside of the contractual arrangement, but the contractual arrangement will only come when you have what? When you have what? Request for public interest or proposal that everybody is entitled to, and everybody put in the bid. And based on the criteria, whether it be UDICOT or whether it be HDC, whether it be the Ministry of Works, based on the criteria that they would have had, because they would have had this committee looking at it. And therefore, in those circumstances, the one that bids based on the criteria that was laid out, the best bid will come to the fore. So I am very dismissive of Dr. Rowley and his cartel talk. However, these people are before the court. The only criminal matter that came is that of Anand Ramlogan. You cannot say that his co-accused, Ramdeen, was part of the government of the time. And therefore he can't lay no claim to that. So he's laying the claim to Moonilal, because Moonilal was in government. But even in those circumstances, it is flimsy at best. And vindictive at worst. You know why Moonilal is before the court today on a criminal charge? Of what? Perversion of justice. You know why? It is sub judice, so therefore I am not at liberty to try the case. But I can tell you what the facts are. What led up to that. And what led up to that was a situation where David West, the current director of the Police Complaints Authority, who of course has a running tit for tat with the Commissioner of Police, but that's a different story. He accused Alan Ramlogan is the man. Why Alan Ramlogan is before the court today? Because he too is before the court on a criminal charge. The one with Alan Ramlogan, not Moonilal. and that is connected to David West. David West said that Anand Ramlogan tried to bribe him for him to get the post that he now has. But in exchange for getting that post, and because Anand Ramlogan had a matter with Dr. Rowley for defamation, he said that Rowley defamed him, connected of course to the situation with those accused who were supposed to be extradited some time ago. They're still here. But he is saying that Anand Ramlogan asked West to withdraw his statement in support of Dr. Rowley from the court. And after West get the work that he have now, went and squealed. Yeah, he went and squealed to the police. And so investigation took place, and of course, on a prima facie basis, meaning that on the surface of it, Anand Ramlogan is now before the court. But it's something very interesting inside of that demonstrates the immorality of Dr. Rowley. The immorality of Dr. Rowley. Dr. Rowley knew that at the time, that was going down because West told him. So therefore West is at minimum a sympathizer of the PNM. What I consider to be a sleeping cell PNM. Just as Ken Gordon turned out to be a sleeping cell individual as far as Rowley is concerned, that Rowley could have confided in with respect to the emails matter and keep it for the time that he kept it, and then launch it out at the appropriate time, just on the cusp of the 2015 elections. So Dr. Rowley knew about the transaction, let me put it that way. And guess what? The appointment was supposed to be given by the Prime Minister of the day, Kamala Prasad Bisesa. You think if Kamala Prasad Bisesa had known that David West was a sleeping PNM, that he could have get a work? But they also knew that when you get a work, it's difficult to extricate one from that work. Just as the Chief Justice. Once you appoint a Chief Justice, it's very difficult to get him out. You appoint a president, it's very difficult to get that person out. So there are some independent jobs like that. You appoint a DPP, it's difficult to get him out. Even though they may be the beneficiary of some relationship that gave them the edge over others who may be more qualified for the job. Politics, in other words. So Dr. Rowley knew. And that position, the head of the Police Complaints Authority, is supposed to get the endorsement at least of the opposition leader, of which Dr. Rowley was in fact the opposition leader at the time when the appointment was being made, contemplated and being made. Knew of the transaction and never told Kamala Prasad Bisesa. Let me show you how immoral this man is. Even if you see Kamala Prasad Bisesa as your political opponent, and she is facing a pickery that she could easily slip into, and of course have pricks all over her skin by the picker. Even if you see that, even if you see her as your political opponent and therefore let her make her mistake, but you know what the facts are, and you are a moralist, that will, of course, resonate in your conscience. That is on that basis that man going and get that boy. 1, 2. But an honorable gun not easy. You'll be saying that. So what you will do, if you see her as your political enemy and therefore you can't bring yourself to inform her that she's making a mistake, mind you, the man is clearly a sleeping cell PNM. And I can say that without fear of contradiction because David West was one of the names that were bandied about by the PNM. It is in the newspaper. It is public knowledge. He and Stuart Young for the replacement in the Senate of D.L. Singh when he would have won the St. Joseph seat for the first time. Remember that? When Volney had to resign. So I am saying that without fear of contradiction and with the greatest of conviction in terms of the veracity of the information. So if you know that, and Kamala Persad-Bissessar is your arch opponent, your arch nemesis, your arch rival, and you want to get where she is, and you have a moral conscience, and you know it was wrong, and that the sitting Attorney General at the time may have done wrong, because he would have an opportunity, of course, to defend himself at the appropriate time. Because justice does not reside only in what Dr. Rowley and the PNM says. No, we have a very independent judiciary. And natural justice will demand that I face my accuser. And these are lawyers, so therefore I cannot speak for them. That is not my specialty. But the fact of the matter is that if it is on the political and moral level and you see Kamala as your opponent and you cannot tell her what transpired because you would have known from David West, because we now know that David West is a sleeping cell of the PNM and therefore would have gone there and spoken to Dr. Rowley. But Dr. Rowley had the president who was the ultimate decider, in other words, to endorse this entire appointment. You can't tell me that the president is seen as a political hack. You cannot tell me that. And therefore, in those circumstances, I am saying that Dr. Rowley is immoral from that perspective. He had a right to. But let me quickly get back to the issue at hand, the crime and criminality. And I said all of that to show you we're at the highest level. If these young people see these people as criminals, they are simply saying, listen, you operating at your level as far as crime is concerned, let me operate at my level, blue-collar crime, where I could take people at gunpoint, or because I am a bit athletic, I could run quickly, snatch a thing and run it. I'd run with it to survive. Because you are doing that at the level of decision making and where you have, of course, access to the Treasury of Trinidad and Tobago. And you have deceived the people into getting there. That's the point I'm making. I thought I would go do all of that to show where monkeys, what monkeys see, monkey do. And if you demonstrate that at that level, clearly those persons down there who are reading and going through Facebook and seeing all of these issues surrounding you will certainly want to say, you have no authority to talk to me. I have been saying, as I say, the man is a rapist and a pedophile. I've been saying that for 5 years. He has not defended his name. He has not even accused me. I call his lawyer, Michael Kwamina. And just in case I made the mistake on the last occasion by saying Anthony, let me just do errata here and say it's Michael Kwamina. I called him on air on 104.7 and told him that I'm calling his in front of the whole world on air. I am calling your client, Dr. Rowley, a rapist and a pedophile. I expect that your pre-protocol letter you will send to me, so that I'm sure you will take action because you will want to defend the name, your good name of your Prime Minister or your client in this case. And the fact that he himself, Michael Kwomina, is now the chairman of 3 of the companies that supplanted or replaced Petrotrin demonstrates further the immoral nature of Dr. Rowley and his callous, disrespectful, acidic, belligerent conduct and assault on the goodwill of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And you're going to see more of it as we go down the road. So I'm saying the PNM is not good for crime. It is not good, as we agreed, it's not good for the economy of the country, because the economy of the country was waning. It was deteriorating before COVID. He used COVID as an election gimmickry, and after that, of course, cases. We don't know where we are now. After, what, $22 billion allocated to it. And only this morning, I'll end here. I'll give you what I wanted to really discuss with you this morning in terms of that on the next podcast, where I'll just go straight into a PowerPoint presentation that I have that I'm going to forego, because I see that I'm getting the same problem like the last time. The battery is low, and I got a sign there, so I want to tell you quickly. Only this morning, having read the news, I am saying that the defeat of the UNC at the 2020 general elections and Kamala Persad-Bissessar, in spite of the gains that the UNC made, would have been a blessing in disguise. Sometimes things work by serendipity, by chance, but it could also be said that it may well be divine providence. An act superintended, organized, and molded by the Almighty. Why I'm saying that? Because in Guyana, right now, the cases of the coronavirus in people have escalated. So before the election, it was 20 deaths. I understand since the new government came in, it was 24 deaths. Something similar like now. But here at Granjana, it's because they didn't keep the protocols and programs and so on that his government instituted before the elections. Are you not seeing the same thing that Dr. Rowley would have been saying up and down the country right now if they had lost in the 2020 August 10th general elections? I seen that, yes. I'm sure you've seen that. Read it, you'll see. Tomorrow, listen to the ground report, and you will get an appreciation as to what is happening there. And therefore, it may well be in advance of we knowing what would have happened. The Lord moves in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform. And therefore, when people thought the ground report would have been off air from 104.7, it is not so. We are on air tomorrow from 6 to 9, 104.7. So we are there. And you have David Granger now lambasting the new government for the exponential increase in deaths. I could imagine if Rowley had lost the elections in spite of his shenanigans and his orchestration. Maybe all of that was divinely inspired so that people will know who these people really are. So on the next occasion, you will make certain, like Moses, when he came out, when he moved the people out of bondage and were in the wilderness, and they had all kinds of things to say. Even though he gave them water, he strike a rock and get water. He crossed them across the Red Sea. Had their enemy swallowed up when they would have safely crossed. All of that. But he was castigated. He was maligned in the process. Just as Kamala Persad-Bissessar has. She is our female Moses. Took us out. Quench our thirst. Give our babies milk. Organize a ministry of the people. Generated a special fund. The Children's Life Fund. Reduce the price of basic items, didn't put VAT on basic items and others, some 7,000 of them. Had $10 billion in the heritage, not in heritage, in our reserves. Had $5 billion in our heritage and civilization fund, and we still have another $5 billion in the private banks in excess liquidity for people who want to engage in business. She left that there in 2015. Today, Dr. Rowley is telling us after 5 years, you have 2 more hard years. After in 2018, 2019, Imbert was telling us that he can see clearly now the rain is gone and the economy has turned around, and end up having to take these very things that Kamala Persad-Bissessar had instituted between 2010 and 2015. The hospital, the aquatic center, the money that was left in the Heritage and Civilization Fund, the reserves. We don't know what is the state yet. I'm waiting with bated breath. I understand it's in December, quite in December. We have to wait for our budget. And things are happening and unraveling right now. And therefore that is something sinister. The fact that you could wait until December. Why not next month? You had all the time and you were in government. You had control of everything, including the COVID protocols and the initiative. How come you had to wait until December? All of that. That's the Moses, the female Moses of Trinidad and Tobago. And her day of reckoning will come. She will get the vindication that she deserves and the UNC with your ultimate assistance, having recognized by listening and viewing programs such as this and the Ground Report on 104.7, where we bring the raw facts for you. Notice Stuart Young, he sent a pre-protocol letter to both me and Andy Williams, and let me say a continued speedy recovery to him. That he made the ultimate sacrifice. He could have died. Andy Williams could have died because Godmen came for him. But the Lord moves in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform. And I have no doubt in my mind that there may be contemplation on mine's and Mikey's life as well. But if he is on your side, no one, not even Rowley and his Koto Jambi, could be against you. No one. And so it's in that regard I am leaving you, because as I said, I have to give you I prepared a PowerPoint presentation that I will give you on the next occasion. It may be this evening or probably tomorrow early, but certainly I'll do that because the battery is running out. I don't want to have the same situation like yesterday. But what I'm saying to you is that have faith. Understand who the enemy is. Not Kamala Persad-Bissessar and the UNC, no. It is those who have connived, who have deceived. And why does it take human beings time? Because I referred earlier to the psychological condition called belief perseverance, where regardless of what you tell a man and he believes it, he going down with it until, of course, he faces ultimate reality like a drug, a cocaine addict, resisting what is good for them. And in the process of resisting, in a state of denial, until the remedy overwhelms and they see a new light and a new dawn. So from this ashes, the phoenix of our liberation and our understanding of the issues surrounding Trinidad and Tobago, because the facts are stubborn things. And we will continue to do what we have to do to bring these facts and realities to you, regardless of the sycophants and the apologists, regardless of those persons who believe that because Rowley is a friend or because they have a nostalgic appreciation of the PNM. But nostalgia simply means the past. We are moving into inexorably a place where there is a requirement for everybody to be familiar with the technology, the information technology. There was one time when every morning I would go and drop a hard copy, a page of news to the various newspapers. Now I can stay right in my office or home and reach you. That is how the technology has advanced. And Dr. Rowley, instead, when he came into office, he knowing that because he talked about his grandson, familiar with the technology, he took away laptops from the very poor among us. And today is begging for laptops when he could have, instead of reconstructing those buildings that he personally takes pride in, an ego trip, a vanity trip. The reality is that the mass of poor people in this country don't have a laptop, or as they would prefer to say, a device. But device, laptop, same thing. But before you say laptop, so they will know that you have laptop, the fact that they have deprived the poor people in this country of laptops. Don't say device, because they're trying to use semantics, use words to make it look less potent than it really is. That dastard act of depriving the people. No one knew that COVID was coming. But Kamala Persad-Bissessar and the UNC was on the right track. And by now, all the other things would have been added, including, of course, universal Wi-Fi, so that you can sit, because we had a recommendation for Lavington, for example, put Wi-Fi free of charge in all of the public institutions, the schools in particular, the community centers, so that people nearby, they can walk towards it, and of course you generate the camaraderie in the community rather than the borderline issue that seem to have lulled now. But if it continues like this in terms of the other policies that are going to be piled on with the hardship coming into the future, crime and criminality will continue to escalate. We have seen it already. It is not easy to hear, and you are not part of it, but it's not easy to hear a young man chop up a young lady and then go in the square and hang himself. That is what we are talking about, people. So share the live, and I'll see you on the next occasion. Share the live, and I'll see you on the next occasion. We have come to the end of this cast.